We look forward to the time when there is no more night, when your people can come out of hiding, when your people can't stop all the fighting, when peace is established across the nation, and we bow before you in adoration at the New Jerusalem, when the war is done, when the world is new, the tribes are one, the New Jerusalem, that's where we'll be, just worshiping the King of Kings, the God of all.
Shalom, everybody. Thank you for joining me this week. I want to thank you for joining me. This is going to be the second part of a two-part series of the what we were talking about last week, and that is making sense of morning prayers. Okay, so as some of you or many of you know, and some maybe not, in the Jewish, when the Jews get up in the morning, they get up in the morning early, and we do our daily prayers. Obviously, it's meaningless if we don't do it truly praying to God. And for those who are not in Yeshua, who are not in Jesus, it's just something basically religious. But if one is truly belonging to Yeshua, then obviously the morning prayers have a whole new meaning for us, okay? So the first part of this last section of this last part two, let's just say it's going to be kind of also done in two parts. As the first part is called the fishbowl, okay? So it's kind of an interesting little aspect. And so what I'd like to speak about now is how God wants to speak to us about our world and about its very creation. But how can God do that, okay? How could we possibly understand the complexity of the creation of the world? So in this session, in this video, I will break down exactly how God can speak to us using human language through the simple and yet complex language of the Torah. That is the first 5 books of the Bible, and obviously, in my opinion, the whole Bible, all right? And the words of creation. So I'd like to try to sort of bring these ideas together and see if we can allow a theory to emerge from them. And so let me get you a bit of an analogy to explain where it is that I'm wanting to go here, okay? So imagine having a discussion with your fish. Now your fish is in the fish bowl in your living room. Imagine this was a super intelligent fish. He got like 800 on his verbal SAT score, okay? And you were chatting with him about your life, all right? Kind of reminds me a little bit of Dr. Seuss. But anyway, the fish knows nothing about your life. He might see things through the fishbowl, but he doesn't know anything really about your life. As a matter of fact, the only thing he knows about is life in the fishbowl and maybe what he can see outside of it in his little water world. So the problem with you and the fish having this discussion is you don't have a shared language. All right, you might even speak the same language, but you don't have a shared language as far as terms. He doesn't know what you're talking about. You kind of have to use fish talk or fish language to talk to the fish, maybe, because that's the only thing he knows. But there's nothing in fish language to describe something as simple as your living room couch, for example, because that's not part of his experience. Like I said, maybe he can see these things outside of the fishbowl. He doesn't know what they are. So we can take that kind of analogy and square it, and you'll understand something of the difficulty of God talking to mankind about creation. God has a language that we don't understand, first of all, people. When it speaks about the language of God in the Bible, it speaks about how the wings of the angels, for example, the cherubim, make a sound like as if when God's speaking. And in certain parts, it talks about the waters. It sounds like the waters. In other parts, it talks about in the Bible how God speaks through the thunder and lightning. So God doesn't have a human language, people. Everybody says, well, God spoke Hebrew first. That was our first language. It doesn't say that anywhere in the Bible, people. God has his own language, okay? Now, the problem with discussing the creation with us is what kind of shared language can you use? Obviously, like I said, you can only use human language. God cannot speak to us in his language. We cannot understand it. Human language is adapted to the human world. Okay, so to some extent, you might say that when God speaks of days of creation, he is borrowing a very basic human experience that we are all privy to. Okay, the idea of a day and using it to explain something which we are not privy to, the creation of the universe itself. So let's watch how it plays out. What we're going to do here is go back to the first day of creation, and the Torah actually talks about 4 things that happened on that first day. I want to show you that those 4 things are sort of very simple, a logical progression of God getting us used to this new kind of day that he's going to use to get everything so simple for us. Okay, so let's kind of go and see what happens. Go back to the text in Genesis, and I'll show you how it works. What are like the 4 elements of day? Okay, first, that happens. The first thing that happens in day 1 is that everything is really chaotic. All right, there's just stuff out there. There's no form. All right, or maybe there is form, but we don't know. It's really dark, and then God does something. There's going to be element number 1. God says there, let there be light. And then he goes, I think the light is good. And he divides between the light and darkness. The second element is this naming thing that has puzzled us. Okay, God calls the light day, he calls the darkness night. Element number 3 is God then says, so it was evening and it was morning. And the fourth element is going to be the summary. Okay, that's one day. I just made a day. So let's just go back and watch that progression in slow motion, and you'll see how that is, in a way, God's talking to the fish in the fishbowl, which is you and I. And so he's just using fishbowl language to describe something kind of way out there, okay? Very out of the fishbowl, which is creation itself. We humanly really can't imagine what this must have looked like, okay? So here we go. Slow motion and through the 4 elements. So the first thing that happens is some cosmic thing that's really crazy, way out there, very difficult to understand. Like I said, no way the poor fish in the fishbowl is going to understand this thing in the living room, this couch. And that is like the first thing that God creates in the universe is the light. Now, what actually was that light? So let's just ask any scientist after the year 1920, and they'll give you some sort of explanation that might make your head spin. There was a big bang. Everybody says there's this big bang. And who knows, maybe that's what happened when God spoke things into existence. Maybe there was a big explosion. Like we said in another past study, however, everything had to be calculated. There were certain things that had to happen for the planets and the universe to be formed, okay? There's this big maybe a cataclysmic explosion, bigger than anything. All of the energy of the universe was there, and all of a sudden there's some cosmic inflation faster than the speed of light, and that energy is just pouring out, and the laws of physics aren't even quite there yet, and there's quantum this, and there's relativity that, and who knows what's flying around. You've got to have kind of a PhD from the University of Berlin or somewhere famous to even talk about, even walk in the dust of Einstein's feet to understand what's happening. So, is it the same for darkness, right? God created this darkness out there. What is that darkness? It's some kind of cosmic darkness. Just ask any astrophysicist from the last 30 years. Maybe it's dark energy or dark matter. this thing that physicists believe account for the 4/5 of all of the matter in the universe. This matter that's impervious to light, okay, that cannot be seen under any circumstances. Maybe it's the singularities that lie at the core of black holes. Okay, you know, black holes, they suck in everything, including light. So who knows what it is? But again, you need that little PhD in physics from the year 2391, way ahead of our time, to understand what's really going on. So God says, look, let me just bring it down to simplicity for you. I'll make it very easy. Let's use fishbowl language for this element number 1, which then brings us to element 2, God naming the mysterious light. He names it to help us kind of wrap our minds around it to get a grip of what's going on. You human beings here on earth, all right, one of the most basic aspects of your experience is you know that daytime, like when it's light outside, and nighttime is when it's dark outside. Can we just agree to call this first mysterious cosmic light, burst of light, and first mysterious darkness that enters into the world? Let's just agree to call it daytime and nighttime, okay? So, and God called the light day, and he called the darkness night. He is the one that gave these names to these two things. Element number 3, God says, you see what we have, boys and girls? We've got light on our hands, okay? What is light? What is the definition of it? Okay, so Erev is the first one. Erev is evening, okay? And in Hebrew, Boker means dawn, okay? So we can say Erev Tov. Tov is good, right? So it means good evening. Okay, Boker Tov means good morning. Okay, and then we have Laila, which is night. Okay, so we say before we go to bed each night, Laila Tov. All right, so these words have meaning. All right, what is dawn? Dawn is the coming of daytime. When you first see that little bit of light coming up from the distance. And Erev, evening, is the coming of nighttime. When it starts to get a little bit dark, but yet it's not dark all the way. So God says, well, now that we've got nighttime on our hands, now that we've got daytime on our hands, so when I made it all happen, when I made this burst of light come into the world, when I made this darkness come into the world, wouldn't you say that we had a dawn? Wouldn't you say that we have an evening? Because first they weren't there, now they're there. They're coming into being, and that's what evenings and dawns are. Now you see why that was kind of a perfect use of fishbowl language to describe the coming into being of these cosmic things, the great mysterious light and the mysterious darkness, because that's how you and I experience in the deepest, most fundamental way, dawn and evening. So what is it like to feel evening? Things are going away. Oh no. I mean, technically, scientifically, they're not, right? We know they're not going away. You know that they're still around, but it feels maybe like they're going away. All right, there are people who are afraid of the night. I don't know why. Maybe they think things are going away. I have no idea. There's this feeling of loss. That's why night is so scary for some. It's like nothing's around anymore. It's like the whole world is dead. And in the morning, it bursts back into life. It's like, hey, there's the light again. It feels like the light just came there for the very first time. Maybe for some people, you know, every morning is like a new morning. It should be for all of us. And that's what morning feels like to many people, to us, and that's what dawn feels like to us. If you want to be sure that it feels that way, we can just get back to our earliest experiences of things to sort of burst into sight, okay? You ever play peekaboo with a child, right? Peekaboo. So you know why they love peekaboo. Why do children love peekaboo? And it really deep down inside, right on the experiential level, when you close your eyes, it really feels like nothing is there, especially for your little children. And you know how little children are, right? They think that when they can't be seen, when they can't see you, they can't be seen, which is why they hide in the most ridiculous places, like under the tables, because they can't see you. So they think because they can't see you, you can't see them, even though you know they're there and they can see their little feet or legs. All right. And then when you open your eyes and your parents are there, feels like your parents have just burst into life again. And it's the most delightful thing in the world, and so you laugh, all right? And here's the funny thing. It's not just kids that like playing peekaboo. Adults like playing it too. Admit it, it's true. And do you know why? Because there's a little part of our souls that also don't believe deeply in object permanence. Maybe that, I don't know. That's the part of our souls that allows us to go into denial about things that we can't see. Like I said, if I can't see it, it's not there. All right, so it's the principle that allows us to go to bed on Friday night when there are all those dishes still in the sink, because in Shabbat, many people don't even wash their dishes. They lay in the dish in the sink all night long until after Shabbat's over. And so there are still these dishes in the sink, and you can drift blissfully off to sleep thinking it's not there. The dishes aren't there. And in the morning, it's like, holy smokes. Look at all these dishes that have just burst into life. They're there. So object permanence is something which we cognitively understand. Deep down in our experience, there's a sense that if it's not there, if I can't see it, it's gone. Sometimes that wouldn't be bad, right? And that is the fundamental way that we experience daytime and nighttime. Nighttime is the time when things seem to go away, they seem to die. And all of the great poets of the world talk about this, okay? Emily Dickinson, Robert Frost, for example. All the associations of death with night, and that's where it comes from, all right? Because at one time, many people thought when you went to sleep, you actually died. That when you dreamt, it was your soul leaving your body and having out-of-body experiences. That was the case. I definitely don't think I'd want to dream, all right? Because some of the dreams I would not want to experience with my soul. So I'm glad it's not that way, because it feels like it all goes away, though. And in the morning, it feels like it bursts back into life again. So God says, guess what? There was a daytime and a morning time. When the thing that you feel, you didn't just feel, it really was that way. Things really did come into being for the very first time at one point, right? The light that feels like when you wake up in the morning, the light is there. It feels like the very first light. There was a daytime in which that was actually the way things were, the very first day of creation. Now that's when our experience would have matched reality. And in that sense, these primal days of creation, the very first day of creation, is more than a day than any other day since then. In all later days, there's only a feeling that things are gone. But in the very first day, it really wasn't there. Nothing was there. Okay, and then it was there. Now, by the way, that point that we made earlier about evening and dawn happening with all the days except for the Sabbath, remember the Sabbath, nothing got created. God rested. He was done. All right? So it makes sense because it really is associated with creativity. What God is really saying is this thing that I created, this light and darkness, those two primordial elements that make up the universe, first they weren't there and then they were there. And in that sense, you have an evening and a morning. So you see, evening and morning are the code words that God uses for coming into being of these central things. It's all about creation, just like we surmised from the absence of Vayi Erev, Vayi Boker. All right, remember, it was evening and it was morning on the Sabbath, the day in which nothing was created. The first day of creation isn't a day, all right, in the sense that it's 24 hours or 12 hours. There's no claim about time, actually, okay? It's a day in the sense that something came into being, light came into being. And if you think about it, it wasn't even the sun yet because the sun wasn't created until another day later, a later day. So there's not even the sun around. Where did this light come from? But we'll get to that later. So we're finally up to element 4, the great climactic moment of day 1, in which God basically says, Yom Echad, there was day. Okay, that's what Yom Echad means, one day. It doesn't mean the first day. The point isn't to count the number of days right now at this point. What God is hitting us over the head with is, do you see what there is? There's a day here, one complete day. In other words, this verse uses the word day to mean two different things. First time was when God called the light day. The word day there really meant only half a day. just the light time part of the day. Because if you think about it, a complete day includes the light and then the darkness. So God says, let's put together the light time part of the day and the dark time part of the day, night, and together, guess what they make? They make one full day, one day. Vayehi erev, vayehi boker. All right. Then you had evening, then you had morning. Yom echad, one day. All right. Very interesting use of words here. God is actually being very sensitive to this poor fish in the fishbowl. The simplest, most intuitive thing you have in the world that you experience every day. That is the notion of a day. That's what I created. I created a day. You see how easy it is, little fish? So, the truth is, Yom Echad, this notion of one day, is actually one of the best, but also one of the most subtle proofs of the theory that I'm suggesting to you, because look at the progression here. First, we little fish in the fishbowl, we couldn't understand the cosmic awesomeness of the Big Bang or whatever it is God used to create the heavens and the earth. Whatever the first burst of electromagnetic energy was. So God calls it light. All right. But then God extends the analogy and says that light, that darkness, let's call it day, let's just call it night. But why? Because you, little fish, you experience daylight every morning and nighttime every evening. You get what they are. Okay, right? Then God extends the analogy a little further. Vayehi erev, vayehi boker. All right, it was evening and it was morning. Little fish, I just want you to know this light, it came from nowhere. I created something out of nothing. And I know that's really abstract for you to think about something coming from nothingness. You don't quite get creation, something out of nothingness. Just think of it like Erev and Boker, evening and morning. The coming of night, the coming of dawn. How at night, it feels like everything is gone. There's nothingness in the world, and at dawn, it feels like creation bursting into life again. And so God extends this analogy still further, Yom Echad. In that sense, little fish, it was one complete day. So just put the nothingness together with the somethingness, the nighttime together with the daytime, and you know what you get? One complete day. Now you know how I started making this little universe. That's how it all began. All right, so that's very nice. It's a very fancy footwork there in the first day of creation. Amazing in my opinion. And now, but how in the world do you expect to carry your theory through all 6 days of creation? So yeah, in day 1, light bursts into being, and there before that it was dark. And then it was light. And I get it, how light was created. It was spoken into existence by God. So how are all the other 6 days, dawns, and evenings? It's like light wasn't really created 6 times in all those days, right? So how are those things day, evenings, and mornings? How are those things fishbowl versions of days? There's no creation of light 6 times to go around, okay? Why are we getting 6 days? Well, that's an interesting question. And by way of answering it, I'd like to play a little version of a game show with you, okay? So that is the first part of this series, of this last part. So now the game is making sense of morning prayers is the second part. So many Americans, obviously, I don't know if this is valid I've never seen it in Italy, obviously, where I live. And I don't know if it exists in England, but there is a very famous game show in America called Family Feud. So let's say you're playing Family Feud, and I'll explain how it works for those of you who don't know. And the question is, how do you know it's morning? All right, that's the question that's going to be given to these 2 families. So I will show you how we might go about thinking about 6 ways we can tell it's morning. This is just kind of a weird little sidetrack, but I like it. And not only that, how all of that can help us finally understand that how we can experience a sincere, heartfelt connection with God each and every day, because that's what I'm leading to, okay? I'm not talking about just morning and light. There's a purpose about leading to morning prayers. So there was a game show when I was growing up. I believe it still exists. called Family Feud. On Family Feud, there was a man named Richard Dawson. All right, I believe now it's somebody else, Drew Carey or somebody, would survey 100 adults out in the public about simple questions. Things like, what do you buy in a grocery store? And they would give the top, I think it was 6 or 10 answers. I can't remember. And the families on the game show would need to compete to see if they could figure out what the most popular survey answers were. Bread might be 51. 51 people might have said bread. And that's why you would buy in a grocery store. But 36 people said eggs, and 21 people said milk, etc., etc. Okay, so we're going to play a version of Family Feud with you about creation. The question I want to ask you is, how do you know it's morning? I think that would be kind of a fun little version to play. A very simple question, seemingly a question that has nothing to do with the 6 days of creation himself. How do you know it's morning? So let's imagine we surveyed 100 people and there were 6 answers. Okay, 6 answers. Now remember, 6 answers. You had to come up with the 6 ways you know it's morning. What would you say? Okay, so here we are playing Family Feud. On the left-hand side, we've got the Hatfield family. On the right-hand side, we've got the McCoys. And I, the game show host, am moderating between you. First question goes to the Hatfield family. How do you know it's morning, Hatfield? Hatfield thinks about it for a while, and Grandpa says, I know it's light outside. I can see. And I say, yes, Hatfield, that's exactly correct. That actually is number 1 on our survey. Ding, ding, ding. The most fundamental way you know it's morning. You can see there's light outside before it was dark, right? So very good. Excellent. But there are 5 more ways you know it's morning. All right. And what are the other 5 ways you know it's morning? Somebody on the McCoy side raises their hand and says, I know, my iPhone alarm goes off. Or we could just say my alarm goes off, right? Because I don't think back then there were iPhones. So that doesn't count. Okay, back then we had alarms, but if they said the iPhone, obviously we didn't have iPhones. So we're not talking about 2019. We're talking about all the ways in which all humankind know it's morning. Even 300 BC, how do you know it's morning? Okay, so we'll leave out the technology. So somebody on the Hatfield side says, I know, I look up at the sky and it's blue. Or maybe in some countries it's gray, right? Maybe in England, northern countries, I don't know, even in other countries. It can be rainy, cloudy, but it's either blue or gray. Okay, but here it says it's blue. Excellent. Our survey says blue sky. That's number 2. And in fact, it's a big, obvious thing. You look up at the sky and it's not dark anymore. It's blue or gray. And that's the second way you know it's morning. How else do you know it's morning, people? Somebody on the McCoys family says, well, I wake up. I mean, some people wake up in the middle of the night too. You can't say it's morning, but it's kind of true, right? There's a circadian rhythm in our bodies. It wakes you up. It wakes you and all the other human beings up. Animals wake up in the morning too, unless they're night animals like the owl or something, because of this circadian rhythm. It's just something that God created inside of us, a rhythm that says, hey, wake up. Our survey says that's number 6. Number 6. Yeah, it's a little subtle. It's out there in number 6, but it's one of the ways we know it's morning. So there are 3 more ways we know it's morning. What are they? What are the other 3 ways we know? Look outside and what do you see? So somebody on the Hatfield side says, the sun comes up. I see the actual disk of the sun. Obviously, like I said, if it's not cloudy. At night, I saw the moon and stars, but in the morning, I see the disk of the sun, if it isn't foggy. So Richard Dodson, or whoever I am, maybe, would say, yes, that's exactly true. It's not just that there's light there in the world, but there's actually the disk of the sun that you could see, if it's not cloudy, like I said. That's another way that you know it's morning. One survey says number 4. The crowd's like, wow, okay. So there are still 2 more ways, we know it's morning. So the game goes over to the McCoy family. Somebody's raising their hand. I know it's morning. I can hear the roosters. If you think about it, roosters kind of have a set time when they like to do their little thing, right? And I can hear the birds sing. Birds start to sing in the morning. I love it. Okay, as if it's not wintertime and they're all gone somewhere else. So I can hear the birds erupting in song. If you have no birds, at least we might have a rooster somewhere. So excellent. Our survey says number 5, 5th most popular way. We know it's morning. All right, we didn't have alarm clocks back then. We didn't have cell phones to wake us up. Sometimes I wouldn't mind that personally myself. All right, a nice, more natural way of waking up. So then Richard Dawson says, okay, great, but there's one more way you know it's morning. One more way. And silence falls over both families until one guy with the little horn-rimmed glasses slowly raises his hand and suggests, I don't know, but I have a greenhouse at home and the plants seem to react in the morning too. Right? They sort of turn their leaves toward the sun and the light, especially maybe if you have some sunflowers. All right? And then the bell rings and it goes ding, ding, ding. You've got the last way we know it's morning. Our survey says number 3, the plants. The plants know it's morning. They turn towards the sun. Maybe the flowers start to open up again if there are flowers. Now, boys and girls, why have we been playing Family Feud? The answer is, in these 6 answers of our survey, we've actually touched the 6 dawns of creation. Wow, think about it. God comes to you and says, now, you know, you fish in the fishbowl, exactly what I did in this cosmic mystery called creation. It's really very simple. All these things that you experience every morning, that it feels like they burst into life with the coming of light. There was a time in which it didn't just feel that way, it actually was. Your experience of dawn, that is just a pale shadow of the original 6 dawns where these things really did burst into life. Okay? So if you think about these answers from 1 to 6, were all done in the order in which God created them. All right? There wasn't any light, then there was light. That's the day. That's the first day. The second thing the survey said, you looked up into the sky is blue. And at first it looked like there wasn't any sky because it was black. And now it looks like there's a sky because it's blue. God says, you get that? All right, now it seems like there wasn't any sky. Well, that was actually reality in the most real day. Okay, there was the second day of creation, when first there wasn't any sky and then there was. That's a Vayehi Erev Vayehi Boker. That's Yom Sheni. That's the second day. Okay. So then you know how plants come to life in response to the sun. At night, it seems like they're just dormant and dead and not even really there. Well, there was a time when they weren't really there. There were no plants. And then they burst into life. God spoke the plants into life. Wow. It was a day when the most dayness of all with reference to plants. Okay. That was the 3rd day. Now, you know how in the morning the sun rises and it feels like the sun, full of vigor, is there bursting forth for the very first time? Well, you know how at night when the sun goes away, you wonder, some part of you maybe, whether it's ever coming back. Whether light is dying and the sun is dying. Personally, I think we would know because it would be really, really cold. But that's just my opinion. Imagine the very first experience of that night at that time, if there were humans on the earth. Imagine how scared, how dark, how cold you would feel. The sun is the sun ever coming back? And in the morning, it's there. Incredible. The sun is back. It's almost like it's been reborn. All right. So, but there was one day in which it really was like that, on which it was birthed. The birth of the sun was the morning of day 4. Okay. Up until day 4, there was no sun. There was simply this light. Kind of strange, but that's how it was. Before that, no sun. It was dark. It was night for day 4. First no sun, and then sun. No creation, then creation. Vayhi erev, vayhi boker, yom revi. Now we're going to go to day 5. There's birds. In the morning, you can hear birds. Seems like there were no birds during the night. Now all of a sudden, it seems like there's birds burst into life. Well, there was a day on which that was actually true. It was a day 5 of creation. All right. So day 6, you know how you wake up in the morning, you feel like you are coming to life again after this time that you felt like you were almost dead at night. That was day 6, the day when all of the animals come to life again. Okay. But by the way, it really is true that in some way, this is how many people experience night. If you think about the drama of falling asleep at night, why is falling asleep something we sometimes fight? I personally don't, but many people do. It's because there's actually sort of, well, work to do when you fall asleep. It's kind of a letting go process. All right. You know that moment when your conscious mind is actually letting go and then allowing your subconscious mind to take over. When you could tell that you're drowsily falling off to sleep and you can still catch yourself. Sometimes you do want to catch yourself because you wonder, where am I going? All right, where's my soul going, for example? Like I said, people used to think that their soul left their body when they fell asleep and would wander around doing these dreams or having these experiences. So I'm going to this mysterious place where even though it happens every single night, I don't know really where it is. I don't know what happens during the nighttime of my life. My conscious mind doesn't know what happens. Will my conscious mind really relinquish that control? And you have to be able to do that, okay? And otherwise, you fall asleep. Otherwise, you will suffer from insomnia, all right? It's kind of like an encounter with death. Like I said, for many people, they used to really believe that. Maybe there's some people out there who still do. I don't know. When we experience night, we experience the closest thing to we will ever have to experiencing death, at least until that time when we do. To non-existence. Everything feels like it's going away, including us, and when we come back, it feels like it's the very first morning. God gets in touch with those fundamental instincts of our experience and says, I want to explain creation, the most mysterious thing for you, using the most obvious, intuitive terms you can ever imagine. It was just days. It was just dawns. Because dawn isn't just about the coming of light time. It's about lots of things, people. So you fish in the fishbowl, just take your experience of dawn and divide it into 6 different experiences. And you know, you've got creation. 6 epochs in which the kinds of things that you see every morning when you first wake up, those things first burst into being in the most glorious mornings that ever were, before we had all this pollution and other stuff, all right? Take all the ways you experience dawn, the reawakening of the sky into blue, the way the plant world wakes up, the way you see the disk of the sun emerging over the horizon, the way you hear birdsong at the sunrise, the way you and the animals wake up in the morning. All those 6 glorious events are how you experience the morning. There really was a kind of night with respect to these things. First they weren't there, then they were. And this seems like a really good point to clarify something that I said before. Earlier, I suggested that God was using the idea of days almost as a fishbowl style metaphor to describe these great epochs of creation. They help us little fish, to understand what's going on out in the living room, outside of the fishbowl. And that's true. But God's use of that fishbowl language isn't really metaphorical. It's, if anything, the reverse is true, okay? I think. If anything, our own days, the ones you and I experience, when we go to sleep and when we wake up, those days are in fact the metaphors for the 6 original days. The days that you and I experience are not days as truly as the first 6 were, maybe, I don't know. Because on each day that you and I go through in our lives, our experience really doesn't match reality, maybe. It feels like things are going away at night and are being reborn in the morning. But it only feels that way in reality. That's not what's happening. Well, God is telling us that there actually were 6 days when what you felt was happening, really was happening. First, they weren't there, the things, and then they really were. Just like the way you experience it, just like the way you feel it. There were 6 periods when creation just burst into being. They're the most real days one could possibly imagine. Okay, now some say that it took 13.4 billion years for all these great 6 periods to make themselves felt. I don't know. I'm personally the kind of guy that says if God says it was done in 6 days, he did it in 6 days. But we don't know that. All right. God isn't talking about days, maybe in terms of 24 hours. It's hard to say. He's talking about Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker in the most fundamental way that we experience Erev and Boker, evening and morning. The coming into being of things when before they weren't there. So remember, the 7th day, okay, the Sabbath doesn't have a Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker. Doesn't say that in the Bible because nothing came to being on the 7th day. But when things came to be, God says first they were gone and then they were there. I think that's pretty cool, okay? So isn't that what you experience every single day? Well, there are 6 of those days. So let's just say God takes 13.4 billion years, rolls it all up into a harmonious experience that we experience together every single day of our lives. All of a sudden, all of creation unfolds itself in just a matter of moments. It's almost as if God is conducting a Broadway show, is putting on the show called creation for us every single day, and we are witnesses of it. And that's the spiritual meaning of every morning. Waking up and smelling the freshness of the air, at least we hope, of seeing the birds, of seeing the sun, the feeling that you have when something special is happening. How does God like us to start the day off? Thanks. All right. Both Old and the New Testament say, give thanks for all things. Sometimes it's not easy because I'm not a morning person, but the first thing I do when I wake up is thank you, God, for this new day. All right. That feeling is rooted in reality. God is doing the play over again. He's letting us touch creation. He's letting us be in on his secret. We get to watch it this time. All dawns are happening every morning and all at once. Okay, so all the things he created are happening every morning. All right, the animals there, the plants are there, the sun is there, etc., etc. And at once, because there's a master conductor who is bringing all these elements together in one burst of glory. That's what's the beautiful thing about this whole thing. So with that in mind, I want to come back to this notion of prayer every morning. Where does this idea come from? Perhaps of praying every morning. Well, maybe it comes from the spiritual meaning of every dawn. If you are turned into this, or if you're tuned into this, then you get up, and when you get up in the morning, what do you sort of want to do? Like I said, it's like you see the symphony of the 6 dawns, and you just want to sing your praise to the master symphony, Adonai, God, Hashem, Yahweh, our creator, the composer of this symphony. That singing of praise takes an interesting kind of form. It takes a form of something we call literally Pesuke de Zimra. What is that? Songs of praise. That begins with the words, blessed is he who spoke and the world came into being. The one who is behind all of creation. Blessed is the one who made all of creation. All right? And that last part is said, Baruch Gozer u'mekayim. Blessed is the one who made all of creation. So why are we saying that? It's not just because it's an article of faith that we need to check off our list. It's literally verses of song. And if you know, when we do our prayers in Hebrew, they're not just spoken. We chant them or we sing them. Okay, they're sung or chanted. There's a melody put to them because there's something that's propelling me to sing. All right, so when I do the morning prayers, I sing my prayers. My simultaneous experience of the 6 dawns of being part of creation every morning. It's a privilege. And then after Pesuke de Zimra is done, we launch into what's called Kriyat Shema. All right, Kriyat Shema. What is it? Why would we say it? Why would we want to include it part of our prayer? It's not just a declaration of faith, an antiseptic objective testament to what it is that I have, that I happen to believe. It's much more personal than that. What have I just experienced? When God created the world in these possibly 13.4 billion years, or maybe literally 6 days, comprising these 6 grand periods of creation that we describe as the 6 days, the 6 coming into beings of these 6 dawns. When God did that, what he's doing every single morning is letting us taste all of it in the space of just a few minutes. So I'm hearing the first of the Birkat Kriyat Shema, that is God through the light that it brings into the world. That light is a catalyst. It's a catalyst for everything else that comes after it. The light is the source of all life that gets created through those 6 days. And in his graciousness, he lets us be a part of that. He renews that for us. So here you are, we're experiencing sunrise. The first thing that happens is that light begins to creep into the world. You look up into the sky, you see the turquoise blue of the dome of the sky. We hear the birds, we can see the plants respond. You wake yourself up, the animals wake up, you see the disk of the sun emerge. And it all happens as if it's wonderfully choreographed, and it is. He recreates that play that he did on Broadway every single day, all of creation, and it's happening at once. So for the fact that it happens at once, what is it that I see? What is it that I can infer? I infer after a silent conductor beyond it all, someone beyond the trees, someone beyond the sun, someone beyond the disk of the sky that is so beautiful and blue. It all come together, indicates orchestration, okay? Orchestration indicates a conductor in charge of the orchestra. So there's an answer for those of you who might encounter people who don't believe in a God at all, atheists or whoever. There's your argument right there. So it starts off with God of all things. They're so magistral. It's so brilliant how it all comes together. It's all yours, the king that's above all. Okay, so the conductor is above the orchestra. The king is above creation. And what is this blessing really? It's a blessing that brings you right into Shema. Okay, what is Shema? Listen. It's part of our faith. There's one force behind it all, creation, the simultaneous recreation of all these things, of all 6 dawns every single day. Testifies to the one creator that synchronizes it all, okay, who puts it all together, who is the force behind it all. Creation isn't something we just have to believe in. It's something that our belief in it comes from our experience. Every morning we get a lesson of faith. A lesson in faith that does not come to our brains. It comes straight from our experience. It comes from waking up every morning and seeing what's going on outside the window. Or if you live in a tent, outside the tent flaps. So when you see that whole symphony come together, well, the first thing we could do is sing. If you think about Shema, if you think about prayer, what are we really doing? We're singing because all of nature sings. The sky testifies to the grandeur of the Creator. The plants, they open up and they face towards the light. They express themselves in joy in the morning. If you think about it, okay. And if you ever get a chance, speaking of that, you want to have any doubts about whether creation sings, you might want to look up a little video on YouTube about a man who is a well-known preacher named Louis Giglio, and he has a fantastic description, or he can explanation, I should say, of about how he discovered that even the stars, the whales, and every living creature, and everything that God created, including the stars, sing one song together. And you'll never guess what that song is. I'm not going to tell you because I would like you to go and find it on YouTube. It's really incredible. So that's just a little side note, okay? So we had the birds bursting forth and literally singing. That's our experience of bird song, this cacophony of bird song. But if you think about it, it's not just a mix. God even orchestrated that. Every dawn, what are they doing but singing? Interestingly, there's scientific research that suggests that birdsong is motivated by a certain chemical in a hypothalamus, which exists in us humans too. It's not just birds that joyously want to sing in the morning. We too have a part of ourselves that joyously wants to sing, whether you want to admit it or not, that want to be part of this symphony. So, who are you, humans? You think you're set apart from creation? You're part of creation. Don't you want to take your place among the rest of created things and sing too to the creator, the orchestrator of all of this? All right. That, I think, is what Shema is all about. That is what Tefillah is all about. That is our morning prayers. All right. And that, I think, if we can get in touch with our most primal response to dawn, that sense of wonder that we get every morning. If you wake up early enough to begin to hear those birds, to begin to see that light, to be able to enjoy the turquoise or the blue of the sky, to see it all coming together, to just draw in our breath and say, wow, and channel that wow into a silent prayer, a silent kind of Shema. Okay, if we can do that, we will have been responding naturally, the way God created us to respond, as a human being ought to in the morning, and we will have prayed. Like I said, something as simple, thank you, God, God of my creation who created me. Thank you for this beautiful new day. Okay. The upshot of all this is that dawn in the morning, they aren't something to be missed. I think it's really beautiful. And I have to say, I have to admit, I have a hard time waking up early in the morning. I'm not a morning person, people. But those times when I do wake up early enough to look out the window and it's dark or semi-dark out, and I get to slowly watch the sun come up, life coming, the earth coming back to life, in the hustle and bustle of getting the kids off to school, packing a lunch for work, etc., etc. Okay, days are really beautiful things. Now there is amazement to be had in dawn. Every dawn is God letting us touch his creation. The moment when God was nearest to us was at the very beginning. There's majesty in creation, but there's tender love and care in creation too. God created these things with love and attention. He didn't just throw it together and say, oh, that's good. Okay? Yeah, it happened a long, long time ago, but God bridges the eons for us and allows us, his creation, a front row center seat to creation every single morning, people. So when we pray in the morning, we're trying to tap into this opportunity that our Creator creates for us in our lives every 24 hours. We try to reach back towards the God who reaches out to us in creation. And he wants to simply have a personal relationship with us. And if between shutting the kids out the door, listening to the news, checking our email, checking our Facebook, we can take some time alone with God to recognize that truth and to sing about it, we will have started our mornings by recognizing the divine gift that was waiting all night long to emerge and be unwrapped. How can we have this relationship with God in the first place, besides praying and singing? Like I said, the only way we can truly have that relationship with him, since unfortunately sin came into the world, is through Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ, our Lord, our Savior. Okay, those who believe in him will be saved. And it says, and Jesus even said, Yeshua said, there is no way to the Father except through me. All right? So that is what I want to put out to you today. For those who don't believe in Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah, now is your time. Now is the time to have that moment where we can say, wait a second, I want to have that connection with God, my Creator. And the only way I can do it is say, Jesus, please forgive me. Please save me. Please let me have that relationship with you. Let me have that relationship with my Father. I really want it, because time is getting short, people. Times are coming when the end of times will come. Before Yeshua, Jesus, comes back to reign for 1,000 years, things are going to get bad to the point where he says in the word, those who call out my name will be saved. There won't be time even to say the little prayer of salvation or whatever. Before things happen, there might just be time for people to call out his name. Okay, so things are coming quickly. When it's time to wake up, for those who are in Christ, those who are in Yeshua, need to wake up. It's time to realize that things are coming short and we need to get in touch with the Creator again. No, you're not going to be raptured out of here before the 7 years starts. Okay? It's going to happen sometime during, probably after the first 3.5 years, maybe even at the end, but it's not before. Okay? It's not going to happen that way. There is time, just a few seconds left on the timeline of all of creation. So let's remember that every morning is a gift while we still have them. Every morning, whether it's sunny, whether it's cloudy, whether it's rainy or snowy, it doesn't matter. God created that time for us to be with him and say, thank you, God. Thank you for letting me be part of your creation. Thank you for giving me the gift of life and experiencing what you made for me. So thank you for joining me today in this interesting little section of how do we make sense of morning prayers. I hope you've been blessed by this, and may you also have a wonderful day. Shalom to you all.
Now for the Aaronic blessing, adesso la benedizione di Aarone. Yevarechecha Adonai veishmerecha, Yair Adonai panavalecha veichunecha, Yisa Adonai panavalecha veyasim lecha shalom, L'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, Sarha Shalom Shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah, the Prince of Peace. Shalom.
Che il Signore vi benedica e vi protegga. Il Signore faccia risplendere il suo volto su di voi e vi sia propizio. Che il Signore elevi il suo volto su di voi e vi dia la pace. In nome di Yeshua, Gesù, il Messia, il Principe della pace. Shalom.
May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom. Shabbat shalom.